Hello, everyone. Welcome to This Week in Economics with Robert Wenzel. I'm Robert Wenzel. In this episode of This Week, I'm issuing a plea to Dr. Jordan Peterson to please stop promoting Marxism. Now, there are some great commentators out there that are battling social justice warriors, battling cancel culture, battling political correctness. I'm thinking of people like Glenn Greenwald, the columnist, and Tucker Carlson, the TV host. Now, both these guys are kind of weak on economics, but they don't spend a lot of time on economics, and their focus is really against cultural Marxism, and they're fighting that. And I sort of put Dr. Jordan Peterson into this category. He's excellent as far as battling the social justice warriors, political correctness, cancel culture, all this kind of stuff. Really, really great. But like Greenwald and Tucker Carlson, he is weak on economics, and he is particularly weak in terms of something known as the Pareto principle. And I think this could get him in a lot of trouble because he's taking Pareto principle and looking at it in a perspective that sort of spins it in a Marxian way, which Pareto wasn't at all. And it could really damage him with regard to everything he's doing in promoting good in the battle against cultural Marxism. What he's really doing is promoting the essence of Marxism, economic problems that Marx saw with the capitalist economy. And this is a very, very bad road to go to. So let me make my case. Now, the first time I heard um, Jordan Peterson mention the Pareto principle or the Pareto uh, income distribution principle was when he had on his show a former student of his, Greg Hurwitz, who is now a screenwriter and producer in Hollywood. And Peterson said he lamented the fact that there was a Pareto distribution problem. Now, the Pareto principle says that 80% of income ends up with 20% of the people, and then you can sort of go up the chain of command there and look at the 1%, and they have a tremendous amount of income relative to most other people. Now, Peterson sees this as a problem. He said on this podcast with Hurwitz that it could be easily understood how some young people tend towards socialism because of concern about economic distribution. Okay, so here it's clear Peterson has a problem with the way income is distributed in that some people get an awful lot of money. Now, as I have pointed out before, some extremely wealthy people can get there for extremely good reasons. If you're producing a product or a service that a lot of people want and you can scale whatever that product or service is, you can make a tremendous amount of money, but it's only because you're providing a good or service to the masses. That's just the way it works. If we uh, look at some of the people now that have reached the top of the wealth list. Jeff Bezos did it largely because of what he did with Amazon. Now he's also a crony capitalist. He's sort of a mixed bag. Same thing with Sergey Brin at Google or Zuckerberg at Facebook. What we've got there is guys that created products and services that many people use. Same thing with baseball players. You have baseball players that have $100 million contracts, but this is only because they put people in the stands. They're providing a tremendous amount of uh, consumer goods that people are absorbing. Basketball players, same thing. So we can understand, and the bigger the country, the bigger the contracts because you have more people available. This can happen in small groups and in tribes or whatever, where where people can produce more, but it's particularly noticeable in a very, very big country, because if you can, again, if you can scale, you can get tremendous amount of money inflow towards you. Same thing. I mean, Jordan Peterson is an author. It's kind of interesting that he sort of has a problem with income distribution, and he sort of gets this flow. He's by being an author, he's selling a successful author. He's selling a tremendous amount of money of books, and that's creating a significant amount of money for him. And it's because he can scale his idea uh, ideas across the spectrum. Now, in addition to this, you've got a situation where he also gives lectures. He fills large theaters with people, or he did. He hasn't been doing it actively for the last year or so, but he did. So again, it was a situation that he was creating a flow of money to himself because of what he the products he was producing, the ideas he was producing that people were interested in learning about. There's nothing wrong with this. He's actually increasing the standard of living of the country, which is the same thing all these other uh, multimillionaires and billionaires are doing, to the degree that they're earning their money by producing goods and services. Now, admittedly, there's two groups. There are the free market people that are producing goods and services and becoming wealthy because of that. That's not a problem. Then there are others who are considered crony capitalists, who really earn additional money, not because they have an ability to necessarily provide goods and services that people want, but because they work with government. Either the government steps in somehow to help them out with regulations and laws, or the government buys directly from them. That's an entirely different story. But Peterson sort of lumps both groups together when he talks about the problem of income distribution. This is a Marxian notion. He's not making the differentiation between the types of ways money can be made, and he just seems to have a problem with great amounts of wealth. And so because of this, he says that he can understand why students can lean towards socialism, because of the problem of the Pareto distribution. This, but that's just students not understanding, again, how on a free market you're going to get people that make tremendous amounts of money because they're producing something for a vast audience. They can scale things, and there should be this. It's really dangerous to sort of limit that somehow, because you're going to create less incentive. You're eliminating incentive for these people to make um, whatever products and services they're producing. So that's the essence of the problem with Peterson objecting to the Pareto distribution. He really sees significant wealth as a problem, without recognizing that there can be different ways that people earn wealth, and a lot of wealth can be earned just by producing goods and services, which again increases the general standard of living. Uh, then he goes on and he says, the rich get richer. So now he's switching a little bit. He sort of moves back and forth. He's not very consistent on what he says at all. By saying the rich get richer, he's kind of implying that there's a case system where the people who are there get the money and stay there. And he's sort of hinting, he doesn't really say it, but when you say the rich get richer, you're sort of implying that, hey, buddy, if you're not in amongst the rich, you can't get there. But this is not true. Again, if we look at the the most wealthy people in the country now are people that have made their wealth over the last decade or so. You look at Bezos, Zuckerberg, Sergey Brin at Google. These are people that made their wealth recently. So it's not a case where the rich get richer. It's a case of whoever is providing goods and services to large quantities of people are going to get wealthy. That's the way it is. That's the way. And then sometimes you can have people get wealthy by providing services to the wealthy. But the point is that they can be new people. There's nothing at all about uh, the rich getting richer. Some rich get richer if they're providing services that people want. If for example, um, the original founder uh, passes away, and if he taught his family well or he brought in the right kind of managers, maybe that wealth can increase even more. Again, if it's providing goods and services, and we're not talking about the crony capitalists here. On the other hand, if someone does not know how to handle a business, that money will dribble away from him. But if we look at the list of people on the Fortune 500, there are all kinds of people on there that have never been there before. Now, um, and as a matter of fact, Pareto understood this. He talked about what he called la circulation de elites, the circulation of the elites. The elites don't stay the same. Now, sometimes uh, Peterson recognizes this, and at other times he doesn't. Okay. Now, here, when he's saying the rich get richer, he's not recognizing that. He's sort of implying that there's a fixed nature to it. But that's not the case. It's not a case where the rich always get richer. It can happen, but not if you're not providing goods and services to the people. Now, he also raises the problem, the cost of being at zero. Now, what he means by this is that there's a tremendous disadvantage or lack of opportunity for someone who doesn't have any money to advance up the ladder of income. And this is just not correct. Uh, there's a very important economist by the name of Israel Kirzner who wrote a book called Competition and Entrepreneurship, where he talked about entrepreneurship as being about alertness. But it's not only alertness about knowing what consumers want, knowing how to put the goods and serve the uh, land, labor, capital together to make the product that consumers will want, but it's also about knowing where to get the capital. What businessman, what person who has money laid away somewhere that might loan it to him, invest in him. That's a key. It's a very important insight, and I actually think that Prisoner deserves the Nobel Prize for that insight because it tells people that they have potential. You got to figure out where to get the land, where to get the materials, where to get the labor, how to put it all together, but also find out where you can get the capital. It doesn't mean you have to have your own capital, your own money to start with. It's an extremely important insight. And by Peterson saying he's concerned for people who have zero, he doesn't get that. He doesn't understand that. But again, that's kind of a different problem from him having problem with the super rich. Now, again, there's two types of super rich. There are ones that produce goods and services, and there are the cronies who just get some kind of deal with government somehow. And he doesn't differentiate. That's an extremely important differentiation. Marx never made that. Pareto did. Pareto actually understands this stuff much, much better than Peterson does. Pareto understood the two classes in terms of the class of producers and the class who count on government for help. He understood that. That was the class he saw that was significant, and he's absolutely right. Peterson just sees the income stream, and that's a very Marxian notion. Um, Now, in addition to the podcast he had with Greg Hurwitz. He also had one with Brett Weinstein recently. And he also brought this Pareto um, income distribution thing up with him. And Peterson is extremely passionate about the idea that the Pareto income distribution, that there are some people that have a lot of money, that's a problem. And he brought it up again in this Weinstein interview. I should mention Brett Weinstein, by the way, is also very good on uh, cultural Marxist things. terrible on economics. I'm going to be putting some posts up at my website, economicpolicyjournal.com, with regard to some of the things that Weinstein said. But he's pretty good on cultural Marxism also. But in this interview, Peterson said some things that are very Marxian. So let's get into that. He starts off. He's telling Brett Weinstein, "I understand the catastrophe of the Pareto distribution. I don't like it. You know, it is there, this proclivity for capital to accrue into the hands in smaller and smaller numbers of people." Now, again, he's not really saying that it's the same people, and then we'll see later he switches, but he says he's concerned about the distribution of income. So he doesn't get that a tremendous amount of the high net worth people are getting that income because they're producing goods and services at a tremendous level, and they're able to scale whatever they're doing. And if they're producing goods and services, what that means is they are producing um, product that people want. It's raising the standard of living for the economy overall. He really doesn't get this. You get the this terrible problem of distribution. That's like a natural law, and the fact that people object to that is completely unsurprising. Well, it may be unsurprising in a way, but he doesn't get the point that the problem is the people misunderstand. It's largely because of what's going on in the education system, uh, uh, colleges, universities, mainstream media. Most of them don't get it. They don't really get what someone that is high has a high net worth really means. That he had to produce some kinds of goods and services that increase the standard of living. Again, we have to make that distinction between those who are producers and those who benefit because of the government system. But it's the government system that's the problem. If you want to eliminate that, you just shrink government. You do not allow government to get involved in so many things. This Peterson does not get that. He says this, you get this terrible problem of distribution. So he doesn't really say he's in favor of equality, which I don't equality of income. I don't think he would go that far. But you have to ask him, what are you talking? What is the problem with the distribution? So clearly he wants to lower the people that decrease the wealth of the people that have major wealth, without him recognizing that that wealth is what causes it. It's not a problem for us. You want the people that are focused on money. There are some people who have the personality where they're just focused on money, or they produce a product that they love to produce. Maybe it's a baseball player, basketball player, and maybe they're doing it for the money. Who knows why they're doing it? Or you get some kind of businessman who just loves money. There's nothing wrong with that. Love to have that guy out there working all the time trying to think about products and goods and services that he can create that I might want to buy. Just let him go at it. It's a great thing. If he's obsessed with money and he's not a crony, then what's going on is he's producing products and services for me and many millions of other people in a big economy like the United States. Let him go. Let him do it. Let them stay obsessed. What is the problem with that? Why wouldn't you want that? Why would you want to attack the people that are creating tremendous amounts of goods and services? Doesn't make sense. Then he says something completely remarkable. Okay, so he sees it as a terrible problem, and the fact that people object to that is completely unsurprising. And the fact that if it goes unchecked, it destroys societies is that I don't think that's a hypothesis that's demonstrably self-evident. He's completely wrong here that it destroys societies. He doesn't really get free markets never destroyed economy in history, any that I know of. Where you get destruction is where there's central planning. The Soviet Union was a society that collapsed, an economy that collapsed. Mao's China was a society and economy that collapsed. Venezuela, as it moved from relatively free market to central planning, collapsed. There is no collapse of free societies where people are free to exchange and things like. He's just got this wrong. He sees this view of a problem between people who are very very wealthy and everybody else in an economy. And again, this is a problem of the understanding of what the wealthy really do for us. They really create a tremendous amount. It's a failure of the education system, which is largely influenced by government. So you have tremendous amounts of propaganda actually um, distorting the picture, distorting what's really going on, distorting the idea that the crony part of the system, the central planning system that benefits certain people, is actually the better part of the system. And that's not the case. And Peterson is very close to falling into that trap. He sort of understands this objection to the great uh, distribution of income. He understands the problem with that. And then he says stuff that's just not true. There's never, ever been in history a collapse of a society where it's been run on a free market system. It's always when it moves towards the central planning and the government getting involved. Now then he really gets really Marxist. He goes on. This was in the interview with Brett Weinstein on Jordan Peterson's podcast. I especially don't find the compassionate concern for working class people and their well-being, the least bit incomprehensible. It's the solutions that are the problem. So again, he gets it wrong. He's talking about the working classes, though there's this battle between the rich and the working class. That's Marxist. That is Marxist thought. That's the struggle that the Marxists see. That is between the wealthy, the capitalists, and the working class. And that's exactly what Peterson is saying here. But that's not the case at all. The working class is benefited by people who are producing goods and services in tremendous amounts where they're earning lots of money. There's no conflict. It's not a conflict at all. It's providing something to the working class so they have more. The standard of living increases. The, the problem where there's a conflict is between the free markets and crony capitalism, where people who are close to the government, when there's a lot of central planning, when there's a lot of regulations and laws made, make it difficult for free market people to operate, and rules are made to benefit those that are close to the government. So that eliminates competition and eliminates the ability for the market to expand and grow. Um, and he says the problem is the solution is very, very complicated. It's not complicated. Shrink government, stop the crony system, allow the free market that provides goods and services for people to bloom. Now, Peterson has a new book out. It's called Beyond Order 12 More Rules for Life. Now, again, I want to emphasize there's a lot of good stuff that Peterson does with regard to his attack on what's essentially cultural Marxism, which is the social justice warrior stuff, the cancel culture, uh, the um, political correctness. This is all good stuff that he attacks. But there's a problem if he really sort of promotes this sort of struggle between the working class and the rich, which he's really talking about. The rest of this stuff doesn't matter because that's where that's the engine that can drive the Marxist ideas and central planning into all kinds of dangerous places. You do not want that kind of central planning. There is no problem that central planning can solve with regard to what's going on. The central planning is the problem. And Peterson doesn't really exactly go all the way to state it completely, but the inference is here with everything he's saying. So now let's go into what he wrote in his book. And I'm going to read a short passage here, and I want to set it up a little bit first. Now, before the passage I'm going to read, he was talking about Freud, and that Freud looked at everything from a Freudian perspective. Whatever Freud's theories were, he applied it across the board. And the passage I'm going to quote, he says that Marx looked at everything through the perspective of the Marxian theory and that this was wrong. Now, uh, but what he does is, as you'll see, is he sort of flips. At one point, he's very, very good at attacking Marx, and then he sort of adopts the Marxist perspective after attacking it. It's really, really quite interesting. So let me read what he wrote here. Marx did the same thing when he did the same thing. He means the same thing as Freud. Marx did the same thing when he described man in a fundamentally economic class-based manner in history as the eternal battleground of bourgeoisie and proletariat. Okay, so this is good. This is a good line from Peterson. He's kind of arguing that it's a mistake for Marx to put everything in terms of this battle between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. Everything can be explained by running it through a Marxist algorithm. Okay, so Peterson's good here. He's attacking that. The wealthy are wealthy because they exploit the poor. The poor are poor because they are exploited by the wealthy. Okay, so this is very, very interesting. He's completely attacking the Marxian perspective of the wealthy are wealthy because the poor are poor. So he's attacking all that. All economic inequality is undesirable, unproductive, and a consequence of fundamental unfairness and corruption. Okay, so again, good stuff. He's against this idea of full equality. Um, then he goes on to say, and this is the flip. This is now he completely flips from attacking Marx on all the key points. He goes on to say, there is, of course, as in the case of Freud, some value in Marx's observations. Okay, he's saying some value. But then what he does is he goes into the core of what Marx is about and says that's good. Class is an important element of social hierarchies and tends to maintain itself with a certain stability across time. Okay. So now he's talking about this class issue, but he's not making the class distinction between producers and people who benefit from advantages given to them by the government. He's thinking class in terms of high net worth individuals versus the working class. That's what he's talking about, and he's saying that this is Marx and that there's value in this Marxian observation. There's no value. It distorts. It doesn't give a real sense. It doesn't explain how the rich get rich. Marx thought it was exploitation, but that's totally wrong. And it's wrong to necessarily look at that way in there's some kind of big struggle between the working class and the rich. The rich are making products and services that make it easier for the working class. And see, um, Peterson doesn't get this because the next line he says, and the damnable fact of the Pareto distribution, the tendency of those who have more to get more, which seems to apply in any economic system, does mean that wealth accumulates in the hands of a minority of people. Okay, so now he's way, way off because he's talking about the Pareto distribution. So he's attacking the fact of this wealth. And then he's talking about the tendency of those who have more to get more. So, and he'll switch again. You'll see he'll switch again. But he's saying here there's a tendency for those who have more to get more. That's the rich get richer argument again that he's making. And some rich do get richer, but not others do, and new people can come up. So he's sort of making this argument that doesn't really happen. Although he switches back again. But when he's saying this, those who have more, the tendency of those who have more to get more. He's talking about the system that benefits the rich against others. He's saying that it's the same kind of Marxian kind of thinking. It's very, very close. The people who make up that minority do change substantially. Okay, so now substantively, the people who make up that minority change. Okay, so now he's flipping just a little bit. He's saying, well, there is this high income people, but they change. They're different. So if they change, what's the problem? If new people can come in, how is that a problem? It's not like there's a ceiling that prevents people from coming in. So he says the rich get richer, but then he says it changes. Well, if it changes, then it's not a case of the rich only getting richer. It means there's new people coming in. So he's really really contradicting himself there. Regardless of the affirmated class stability, and that is a crucial point, but the fact that the comparative rich are always a minority. Now he's switching. Now he's switching from the rich get rich to the rich are always a minority. So on a bell curve, you're gonna have people that are way out there on the bell curve who have a lot of money. So that's true, but it doesn't mean that they're the same. And he kind of admits that he's really jumping around here. The rich are always a minority and a small one, and that seems dismally immutable. Okay, so he doesn't. He's really objecting to the super rich here. So it's a very Marxian notion. He doesn't really even say super rich. He just says the rich are a minority. But that's because there are some people that have skills and talents that can scale and are things that people want. They either know how to produce products, how to bring the land, labor, and capital together. They have a talent that's scalable. What is wrong? There's nothing wrong with that, but he's calling it dismal. He doesn't understand that people in a free market system, if they're producing goods and services, are really helping out the middle class by providing more goods and services. Pareto, by the way, again, really understood this. He did not see a problem with uh, the distribution he talked about. He saw, and he did not think there was some kind of class struggle between the rich and the working class. He saw it as a struggle again between free markets, where there are people producing goods and services that benefit, raise the standard of living, and people who uh, benefit from the government. And I'm going to quote this the great economist, one of my favorite economists, Murray Rothbard, who wrote a 2-volume history of economic thought. In volume 2, he talked about Pareto, and he explained um, the free market orientation of Pareto. So I'm going to read you a little brief passage from him. Pareto's first great treatise on economics, the Cours d'Economie Politique, was heavily influenced by both Gustave de Molinari and Herbert Spencer. In every polity he points, there is a minority ruling class exploiting the majority who are the ruled. Okay, so now he's talking about the class that's the ruling class that gets the regulations and benefits that help them. Harris Pareto treats as an example of legal plunder and theft. Pareto left no doubt that his objective was to eradicate all such legalized plunder. Okay, so Pareto is much better here than Peterson. Peterson's got a snippet of Pareto when he talks about the income distribution, but he doesn't make the Peterson does not make the important distinction that Pareto makes here, that there's a crony group that gets benefits that is really not helping uh, raise the standard of living. And he uses tariffs as an example. And then Rothbard goes on, as Placido Bucolo points out, Pareto did not, as some analysts claim, adopt a Marxian view of class struggle in his course. Okay, so this is important. This means that Pareto is actually way in a different category than Peterson. Peterson sort of grabs onto this distribution thing, but Pareto didn't see that income distribution, but Pareto didn't see that as the problem. Peterson sort of just takes that first morsel of what Pareto wrote and doesn't develop it properly from there. He just sort of says the distribution is a problem. The distribution isn't a problem. It's there are two classes that get money, get wealth: the ones who produce and the ones that uh, gain the wealth because of some kind of crony deal going on. And Rothbard then quotes Pareto to really hammer it in. The class struggle assumes two forms at all times. Okay, now this is the class struggle that does exist and is a problem versus this Marxian kind of struggle between the super wealthy and the working class, which really again benefits the working class. There's no problem at all with super wealthy producing more goods, services. Um, that's just helping people out because there's more goods and services around, including the working guy. No conflict there at all. Pareto's got it right. The class struggle assumes two forms at all time. One consists in economic competition when it is free, produces the greatest utility. For every class, like every individual, even if it only acts to its own advantage, is indirectly useful to others. Okay, so he's using kind of an Adam Smith argument here that basically, even when a businessman is operating in his own self-interest, he's benefiting other people because he has to produce products that other people want. Otherwise, he won't be able to make more money. So the businessman works in his self-interest, but that self-interest results in a greater amount of product for everyone. So it benefits everyone, increases the standard of living. Pareto says that's one class. So what's the other class? He tells us the other form of class struggle is the one whereby every class does its utmost to seize power and make it an instrument to despoil the other classes. And there it is. That's it. That's what Peterson doesn't get. It's right there in Pareto. Pareto gets it. The problem is producing classes and parasites who live off the production by regulations and restrictions by the government. That's the problem. That there are rich is not a problem. If the rich are getting there by making products, goods, and services for all of us, we don't have to buy any of those goods and services if we don't want to. So then those rich have nothing to do with us. But if there's regulations and restrictions, we are forced to abide by those regulations and restrictions, as are other businesses, and that hampers the free market and the development of products and services. That's what Peterson doesn't get. He's using his class struggle, and although he wavers on it back and forth, his fundamental thing is there. He sees this problem of the distribution in terms of the rich and the poor, as opposed to the struggle between those who are producing and those who are just sucking off of it. And if Peterson doesn't get that straight, it doesn't matter what he's talking about, the cultural Marxist stuff, because if this is in people's mind, if this is in the mind of students, they're just never going to adopt freedom as an ideal. They'll want central planning, and they will not understand that central planning is the problem that destroyed the Soviet Union, that destroyed Mao's China, that is destroying Venezuela now. Thanks for listening. I'll be back next week. Be sure to check out my website, economicpolicyjournal.com. That's economicpolicyjournal.com. I write there on the economy, on economic policy, economic personalities, Monday through Friday. And then I continue to post on Saturday and Sunday. I do not stop. I'm posting, writing all the time. If you're interested in what's going on in the economy, it's the place to be. economicpolicyjournal.com. Thanks for listening. I'll be back next week.